last week you had a very interesting testimony that I think represents a little bit of what you're saying of, where you testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee about voting rights and the issue of voter ID. And I want to read a quote. You called out the demeaning and insulting claims from Democrats about how being Black in America means you can't obtain a government ID to vote. And I feel like that's sort of an interesting example of what you're just talking to, where you don't want to just be looked at as along race and party lines. We're just Americans. Just because we're Black doesn't mean we can't have voter ID. Yeah.
And I think I called it. It's the left soft bigotry of low expectations, and I don't subscribe to that under any way, shape, form, or fashion. I am an American. I am a veteran. I am educated, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I am so many things. I'm a congressman, I'm a combat veteran, I'm an Apache pilot. I am so many things before you get to the way that I look. And don't get me wrong, I'm Black and I'm proud. I'll say it loud all day, every day. But that's not how I view myself, and what I do not like are benevolent liberals that try to wrap their arms around us and try to pat Black people and people of color on the head and say, poor you, we all can figure out how to get an ID. We all can figure out how to be successful in America, but you can't. That's ridiculous, because so a man thinketh, so he is, or so he or she is. And I like to make sure that we have high expectations for people, just like everybody else would have for themselves, regardless of the way you look. I understand this country's come a long way. My great-great-grandfather was born on a plantation. But yet here I sit before you, again, as a Black man in a white majority district in a suburb of Houston, Texas, as a strong conservative. That's where we are. And that's because that's the expectations that I have of myself. It's the expectations that my parents had of me, and I'm going to have those same expectations for all Americans, regardless of the way they look.
But then what do you say to the people that say this is a systemic issue? Like, what is the reason that is preventing so many minority groups from getting voter IDs? And, you also touched on the term personal responsibility, especially during that testimony. So that's my first question. And then my second question, going back to the personal responsibility, how do you instill that more? Correct. If there's a systemic issue?
So it's not 1950 anymore. And this is something that was instilled in my house too at a very young age. My dad's 74 years old, which means that my dad was born in 1949 and he's still alive and well. My dad grew up in a segregated South in New Orleans. And my dad always tells me, son, you don't have it difficult. I had it difficult. So what's your excuse? That is all. This is not 1950, 1960 anymore. It's 2024. Things have changed. And the only thing that's preventing you from being anything you want to be in this country is you. And by the way, there are people that started off with way less, ended up with way more. There are people that weren't born in this country that moved here with nothing and are wildly successful. So the fact that you were born in this country, no matter how hard it might be for you, what's your excuse? And do not allow people to have low expectations of you, because you will live up to that.
I am just curious as well, being a Black member of Congress, a Black Republican in Congress, do you feel like there is support from members of both sides? Because I know Rep. Byron Donalds has spoken out in the past claiming he was being ostracized from the Congressional Black Caucus. So do you think there is a need maybe, have you considered joining that as well? No. Why?
The reason why is because ideologically we don't align. On a policy standpoint, we don't align. Tacitly, there's a bit of a requirement that you have to at least work on X amount of things with members of the CBC, and given where I am politically, this is not going to work for me. But that's an ideological issue, less of a Black issue. And to be honest with you, I get along with everybody. Democrats, Republicans, Black, white, I don't really care.
Do you think there is a need for a Black Republican caucus?
No. How about just a Republican caucus? I think it was Morgan Freeman that said it best in an interview. I don't want Black History Month. I just want history. I want American history. I want us to be ingrained, to be inculcated in the very fabric of the country holistically. I just don't want to be Black this and Black that, because I want to be seen for way more than that.